The undercover boss saw the single dad chef chopping vegetables at 3 in the morning, and then he found out why he skipped college. But the boss didn't ask. He just assumed. The ballroom is full of cameras and strangers, and the single father is on stage doing something he swore he'd never do again, letting people see what he's capable of. His daughter is somewhere in this room. He doesn't know that yet. He's focused on the knife in his hand, the carrot on the cutting board, the seven-sided cut he's making without thinking, muscle memory from a life he walked away from when she was born. The celebrity chef beside him has stopped talking. He's watching the single father's hands move. Something doesn't add up. This isn't amateur work. This is mastery. "Who taught you?" the chef asks. The single father doesn't answer, because the truth is too heavy to say out loud. Nobody taught him. He taught himself, alone. At 3 in the morning, while raising a child with special needs, while grieving a sister he couldn't save, while building a life out of sacrifice so quiet the world never noticed. And then his daughter's voice comes from the back of the room. "My dad got into the best cooking school in the country." 50 people turn to look at her. She's 9 years old, holding a laptop like a shield, walking toward her father with tears in her eyes. He didn't go because he had to take care of his sister. And then he had to take care of me. The room goes silent. That's why he skipped college. Not because he wasn't good enough, because we needed him. The single father drops to his knees. He's crying in front of everyone. For the first time in 7 years, his daughter wraps her arms around him and whispers something the microphones don't catch. And the corporate boss who filmed him at 3 a.m. and called him a cautionary tale realizes, far too late, what he's done. If you believe that love is the truest form of greatness, stay with this story, because what happens next will make you weep and remind you why we fight for the people who quietly hold the world together. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, what's the biggest sacrifice someone made for you that you didn't understand until years later? But to understand how a 9-year-old girl became her father's defender, how a man who once had the culinary world at his feet ended up invisible in a basement kitchen, you need to go back 7 years, to the morning after everything fell apart. The Hamilton Hotel had a basement kitchen that smelled like grease traps and old steam. The fluorescent lights hummed 24 hours a day. The floor was cracked linoleum that had been wiped once, decades ago. At 3 in the morning, the space belonged to one man. Thomas Brennan pushed through the loading dock entrance at 2:58. He never arrived early, never arrived late. He swiped his card at the time clock, heard the beep, and walked to his station without turning on any additional lights. The overheads were enough. He tied his apron, washed his hands, pulled his knife roll from the locker. The routine had not changed in 7 years. Thomas was 39 years old, and he looked older. His shoulders curved forward slightly from years of working over cutting boards. Gray touched his temples. His hands were scarred and calloused in ways that told a story he never spoke aloud. He worked the overnight prep shift 5 days a week, 3 in the morning until 11. He lived 4 blocks away in a small apartment with his daughter. He had no car. He walked to work in the dark and walked home in the light. His daughter's name was Nina. She was 9. She had dark, curly hair, and her mother's eyes, and an anxiety that tightened her small body like a fist. She struggled at school. She struggled with other kids. She clung to routine the way some people cling to religion. Thomas built his entire life around her. He woke at 7 every morning after 4 hours of sleep. He made her breakfast. He walked her to school. He came home and slept until 2 in the afternoon. He picked her up at 3. They did homework together at the kitchen table. He made dinner. They ate together. He read to her before bed. He kissed her forehead. He told her he loved her. Then he dressed for work and walked into the night while she slept. He had no friends, no hobbies, no plans beyond tomorrow. At his station, Thomas pulled the first crate of vegetables toward him. Carrots, 20 pounds. He selected a knife from his roll and began. His hands moved without thought. The blade flashed under the fluorescent light. Thin coins of carrot fell in perfect uniform thickness, each one identical to the last. The rhythm was meditative. The sound was clean and sharp. Anyone watching would have noticed something unusual in the precision, in the speed, in the way his shoulders stayed loose and his breathing never changed. But no one was watching. Thomas worked alone. A memory surfaced without warning. He was 18, standing in his mother's kitchen, holding an envelope. The return address read, Culinary Institute of America. His hands had shaken when he opened it. Full scholarship. Room and board. A future that looked like light. He blinked. The memory dissolved. The carrots were done. He moved to onions. Another memory. A hospital room. Machines beeping. A nurse holding his hand. Her name was Sarah, and she would become his wife and then his ex-wife and the mother of the child who slept 4 blocks away right now. He blinked again. His knife never stopped moving. The onions became celery. The celery became bell peppers. The bell peppers became fennel. He worked through each crate with the same unhurried precision. No wasted motion, no mistakes. His technique was flawless in ways that prep cooks should not possess. French cuts, brunoise, julienne, bâtonnet. Movements learned from books, practiced in silence, perfected over years when no one was watching and no one cared. One more memory. A funeral. Winter. His sister's wheelchair folded beside the casket. He had been 32 years old, and he had lost the last person who remembered who he used to be. Thomas set down his knife. He flexed his hands. His fingers ached in the cold basement air. He had been working in this kitchen for 7 years. He had never called in sick, never complained, never asked for a raise. The management barely knew his name. The day shift cooks nodded at him in passing, but they did not know he had a daughter, or where he lived, or what he did on his days off. He liked it that way. Invisibility was a choice he had made deliberately. Invisibility was safe. Invisible men did not want things. They did not dream. They did not risk. They did not fail the people who needed them most. At 6:30, the day shift began to arrive. The sous chef came first, a woman named Angela who had worked at the Hamilton for 15 years. She glanced at Thomas's station. Everything prepped, everything labeled, everything ready. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Thomas said. She moved to her station. 3 more cooks arrived. They talked among themselves. Thomas cleaned his knives and put them away. He untied his apron. He washed his hands. He clocked out at exactly 11. The loading dock door opened onto an alley that smelled like trash and rain. The sun was up. The city was awake. Thomas walked home through streets that had filled with people while he worked underground. He passed coffee shops and bus stops and corner stores. No one looked at him. He climbed the stairs to his apartment. He unlocked the door. Nina was at school. The space was quiet. Her backpack sat by the door where she had left it this morning. Her purple jacket hung on the hook. Thomas stood in the small kitchen and looked at the window. Sunlight came through in a pale square. He should sleep. He had 4 hours before pickup. But he did not move. Something inside him felt like a door left open, like a question half-formed, like the beginning of an ache he did not have a name for. He thought about the way his knife had moved this morning. He thought about the muscle memory that lived in his hands. He thought about the scholarships he had turned down and the life he had walked away from and the person he used to be before he learned that wanting things could kill the people you loved. Thomas sat down at the kitchen table. He put his head in his hands. He did not know that in 3 days, a man with a camera would walk into his kitchen and ask him questions he had spent 7 years trying not to answer. 1 week later, the mandatory staff meeting was called for 6 in the evening. Thomas stood in the back of the conference room with his arms crossed. The space smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. 40 employees filled the chairs and lined the walls. Housekeepers still in uniform, front desk staff, kitchen workers from both shifts. Everyone looked tired. A man in an expensive suit stood at the front of the room beside a projector screen. He was thin and too enthusiastic. His smile was wide and rehearsed. "I'm Elliot Kaplan," he said, "Chief Brand Officer for the Hospitality Group. I know you've all heard about the challenges we've faced this year." People shifted in their seats. The challenges he meant were the labor lawsuits. 3 former employees had sued the company for wage theft and unsafe working conditions. The story had made the local news. The company had settled quietly. Kaplan clicked a button. The screen behind him lit up with the words, "Voices from the Heart of Hospitality." "We're launching a documentary series," he said. "Multi-episode, authentic storytelling that honors the dignity of every role in our organization. We want to show the world who you really are." A housekeeper near Thomas muttered something under her breath. Thomas caught the word performance. Kaplan kept talking. His voice had the smooth cadence of someone who had given this speech before. He used phrases like genuine human connection and celebrating our workforce and transparency through narrative. "I'll be shadowing various departments over the next month," he said. "Housekeeping, front desk, kitchen operations, including overnight shifts. We start filming in 3 days." The room went quiet. Thomas's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "This is voluntary, of course," Kaplan added quickly, "but we hope you'll participate. This is an opportunity to be seen, to be valued." No one raised their hand. No one asked questions. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Kaplan smiled anyway. He thanked everyone for their time. The meeting ended. People filed out quickly. Thomas moved toward the door with his head down. A woman beside him touched his arm. Her name was Maria. She worked housekeeping on the same overnight schedule. They had crossed paths 100 times, but rarely spoke. "These things never end well for us," she said quietly. "I know," Thomas said. "They'll film us and edit it however they want, make us look however they need us to look." Thomas nodded. He did not disagree. Maria walked away. Thomas left through the side exit and headed home. The sun was setting. The streets were loud with evening traffic. He walked quickly with his hands in his pockets. At home, he made dinner. Pasta with butter and frozen vegetables. Nina sat at the kitchen table doing homework. She was small for 9. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore the same purple jacket she wore every day. She looked up from her worksheet. "Dad, what's wrong?" Thomas set the plate in front of her. "Nothing's wrong. You look worried." He sat down across from her. He tried to smile. "Work is changing a little," he said, "but it'll be okay." Nina studied his face. She was perceptive in ways that sometimes frightened him. She saw things other people missed. "Are you in trouble?" "No, I promise." She did not look convinced. She returned to her homework without another word. The next morning, Thomas walked her to school. They moved through the neighborhood in silence. Nina carried her backpack with both hands. Her steps were small and careful. At the school gates, she stopped. "Will you pick me up today?" she asked. "Same as always," Thomas said. She nodded. She did not move. "Nina, it's okay." She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and serious. "Kids say things about you." Thomas's chest tightened. "What kind of things?" "That you're weird, that you work nights, that you're not like other dads." He knelt down to her level. He put his hands on her shoulders. "Does that bother you?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. "I just want them to see you're good at something," she whispered. Thomas did not know what to say. He pulled her into a hug. She was so small against him. So fragile. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." She pulled away and walked through the gates. Thomas watched her cross the playground. She did not join the groups of kids playing near the swings. She walked to the far corner by the fence and sat down alone. A girl walked past her. The girl said something Thomas could not hear. Nina's shoulders curved inward. She did not respond. Thomas stood there until the bell rang. Then he turned and walked home. Back in the apartment, he lay down on the couch. He needed to sleep. His shift started at 3 in the morning, but his mind would not quiet. He thought about Kaplan's smile. He thought about cameras in his kitchen. He thought about Maria's warning. These things never end well for us. He thought about Nina sitting alone on the playground. I just want them to see you're good at something. Thomas stared at the ceiling. The afternoon light came through the window in pale strips. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. A dog barked. The world continued around him. But he could not sleep. Because in 3 days a man with a camera would walk into his kitchen and ask him questions he had spent 7 years learning not to answer. 3 days later, Thomas arrived for his shift and knew immediately something was wrong. Light bled under the kitchen door. Not the usual fluorescent hum. Something brighter, harsher. He pushed through the entrance at 2:58. Camera lights stood on tripods in the corner. A man in expensive jeans adjusted one of the stands. Another man sat on a milk crate checking audio equipment. Cables snaked across the floor. Elliot Kaplan stood in the center of the kitchen with his arms spread wide like he owned the space. "Perfect," he said to the camera operator. "Get the angles we talked about, low and intimate. I want to feel the environment." Thomas walked to his station without speaking. He tied his apron. He pulled his knife roll from the locker. His hands moved through the routine, but his chest felt tight. Kaplan noticed him and smiled. "There he is. Don't mind us. Just pretend we're not here." Thomas said nothing. He washed his hands and began prepping. The first crate was carrots. He selected his knife and started cutting. Behind him, the camera moved. He heard the operator's footsteps circling his station. The lens focused on his hands. Thomas kept his eyes down. For 30 minutes, no one spoke. Kaplan stood to the side and watched. He gestured occasionally to the camera operator. Different angles. Closer shots. The audio technician adjusted the boom mic overhead. Thomas worked through the carrots, then onions. His knife never stopped moving. At 3:20, Kaplan stepped forward. "Can we pause for a second?" Thomas set down his knife. He did not turn around. Kaplan moved into his line of sight. He positioned himself so the camera could capture both their faces. "I'm Elliot Kaplan. I just want to ask you a few questions. Nothing formal, just a conversation." Thomas looked at him. He waited. "How long have you worked here?" 7 years. "And what's your role?" "Prep cook." "Overnight shift." Kaplan nodded like this confirmed something. "Did you go to culinary school?" "No." "But you wanted to, right?" Thomas hesitated. The question felt like a trap. "What happened?" Kaplan leaned in slightly. His voice dropped into a softer register. "Couldn't afford it. Didn't get in?" Thomas's fingers tightened on the edge of the cutting board. "I got in," he said quietly. Kaplan's eyes widened. His energy shifted. He glanced at the camera operator to make sure they were still rolling. "You got in. To culinary school. Full scholarship. But you didn't go." Thomas said nothing. "Why not?" Kaplan asked. "What stopped you? Was it money? Family obligations?" The words hung in the air. Thomas could feel the camera on his face. He could hear the faint whir of the equipment. In the background, Angela from the day shift had arrived early. She stood near the walk-in freezer, watching. "I couldn't go," Thomas said. "I had family." Kaplan waited for him to elaborate. When he didn't, Kaplan turned to the camera. His expression shifted into something practiced, something meant to convey deep empathy. "This is the reality for so many Americans," he said. His voice was louder now. Performative, talented, hard-working, but trapped by circumstances beyond their control. This man got into culinary school with a full scholarship, but he couldn't go. And now, at 40, he's here, chopping vegetables at 3 in the morning. Thomas's jaw locked, his hands curled into fists at his sides. Kaplan turned back to him. He put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. The touch was light but possessive. "This is the ceiling when you don't have that piece of paper," Kaplan continued. He was speaking to the camera now, not to Thomas. "Education is the great divide in this country, and when people slip through the cracks, this is where they end up." He looked at Thomas. His expression was pitying. "Do you ever think about what you could have been?" The question hit like a punch. Thomas stared at him. His breath came shallow, his vision narrowed. He did not answer. Kaplan waited. The silence stretched. Behind them, Angela shifted uncomfortably. The audio technician looked at the floor. Finally, Kaplan smiled. He patted Thomas's shoulder twice. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. "This is exactly the kind of story we need to tell." He stepped back. He gestured to the crew. "Let's get a few more shots. Wide angle, show the whole space. I want people to understand the environment these workers operate in." The camera operator moved to a different position. Kaplan started narrating again. His voice was quieter now, meant only for the microphone. He talked about the invisible workforce, the people who kept hotels running while the world slept, the dignity of labor. Thomas picked up his knife. He returned to the cutting board. His hands moved through the motions, but they were shaking. 20 minutes later, Kaplan checked his watch. "I think we got what we need," he said. The crew began packing up. They coiled cables. They broke down the lights. Kaplan walked over to Thomas one more time. "This footage is going to really resonate," he said. "People need to see this. Thank you for being part of it." Thomas did not look at him. Kaplan left through the loading dock door. The crew followed. Their voices faded into the alley. The door slammed shut. The kitchen went quiet. Angela walked over. She stood beside Thomas's station. She did not say anything for a long time. "You okay?" she finally asked. Thomas shook his head. "No." Angela nodded. She returned to her prep work without another word. Thomas stood alone at his station. The carrots were only half finished. The onions still waited in their crate. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Not from exhaustion. Not from cold. From something he had not felt in 7 years. Something he had buried so deep he thought it was gone. Rage. Thomas picked Nina up from school at 3 o'clock like he always did. She was waiting by the fence alone. Her purple jacket was zipped all the way up, even though the day was warm. Her backpack looked heavy on her small shoulders. "Hey," he said. She took his hand without speaking. They walked home together. She did not tell him about her day. She did not ask about his. The silence felt wrong. At home, Thomas made her a snack. Apple slices and peanut butter. She sat at the kitchen table and picked at the food. Her eyes stayed on the plate. "Nina, what's going on?" She looked up at him. Her face was tight with something she could not name. "Dad, why didn't you become a real chef?" The question landed like a punch. Thomas sat down across from her. "Where did that come from?" Nina's fingers twisted the edge of her napkin. "Kids at school, they say things." "What kind of things?" "That you just work nights. That you're not like other dads. That you don't have a real job." Thomas felt his chest tighten. He reached across the table and covered her small hand with his. "All jobs are real, Nina. The work I do matters." She pulled her hand back. "But you don't do anything important. You just cut vegetables." The words hurt more than they should have. Thomas took a breath. "Did you want to go to cooking school?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I did." "Then why didn't you?" He looked at his daughter. 9 years old, too young to understand and too old to lie to. Sometimes you make a choice because someone you love needs you. Nina frowned. But don't you wish you'd gone? Thomas did not hesitate. Every single day. The honesty surprised them both. Nina's eyes went wide. Thomas realized he had never said that out loud before. Not to anyone. The truth sat between them like something fragile and sharp. Nina looked down at her plate. She did not ask any more questions. But something had shifted. A door had opened that Thomas did not know how to close. 2 days later, Nina's school held Parent Volunteer Day. Thomas had signed up for cafeteria duty because Nina had begged him. She wanted her classmates to see that he was good at something. The request had broken his heart. He arrived at the school at 10 in the morning. The cafeteria manager was a woman named Diane. She looked exhausted. The kitchen was chaos. 3 staff members were trying to prep lunch for 200 kids. Food sat in half-opened boxes. The stove was covered in pots that no one was watching. "Thank God," Diane said when she saw Thomas. "Can you help with vegetables?" Thomas washed his hands and looked around. The workflow was wrong. People were getting in each other's way. No one had mise en place. No one had a system. He started with the basics. He moved the cutting boards to a better position. He showed one of the staff how to hold a knife properly. He julienned carrots in 30 seconds. The woman beside him stopped and watched. "How'd you do that?" "Practice," Thomas said. He moved to the stove. The pasta water was not salted. The sauce had no depth. He added salt. He added pepper. He found dried herbs in the cabinet and tossed them in. He tasted the green beans and realized they needed acid. He squeezed lemon over them. Small touches. Professional touches. Things he did without thinking. By 11:30 the food was ready. Thomas helped plate it. He arranged each tray with care. The pasta looked better. The vegetables looked fresh. The meal looked like someone had actually tried. The kids came through the lunch line. Nina was near the back. She watched her father through the serving window. Her expression was impossible to read. A parent standing nearby took a photo of her tray. She was a young woman with a phone in one hand and a camera bag over her shoulder. She looked at the food and then looked at Thomas. "Did you make this?" Thomas nodded. She took another photo. She smiled. "This is actually good. Like, really good." Thomas said nothing. He returned to the kitchen and started cleaning up. Diane found him at the sink 20 minutes later. "I don't know what you did," she said, "but that's the best lunch we've served all year. Thank you." Thomas dried his hands. He looked through the serving window at the cafeteria. Nina was sitting at a table with 2 other girls. They were talking. She was smiling. That was enough. He left through the side door and walked home. He did not think about the parent with the camera. He did not think about the meal. He thought about Nina's face, the way she had looked at him through the serving window. Like maybe, for 1 hour, she was not ashamed. But what Thomas did not know was that the parent with the camera was a food blogger. She posted the photo online that afternoon with a caption that was half joke, half genuine surprise. "Did a Michelin chef secretly invade our school cafeteria? These green beans have technique." The post got 40 likes in the first hour. Then someone from a Philadelphia food industry group shared it. Then someone else commented. A line cook from a restaurant called Veggies wrote, "Whoever cooked this trained somewhere serious. That's French technique." The comment was screenshot. It was shared in a private Facebook group for Philadelphia chefs. People started speculating. Someone wrote, "Wasn't there a prep cook at the Hamilton years ago who people said was crazy talented but never went anywhere?" By evening, the question was circulating through kitchens across the city, and no one had an answer. The documentary episode premiered at a corporate leadership retreat in New York. 60 executives sat in a hotel ballroom and watched Elliot Kaplan's footage on a projection screen. The episode opened with sweeping shots of the Hamiltons' facade at night. Then it cut to the basement kitchen at 3 in the morning. Thomas's face filled the screen. His hands moved through vegetable prep. The camera captured every cut, every motion. The precision that he had spent 20 years learning in silence. Kaplan's voiceover played over the footage. His tone was somber, reflective. He talked about the invisible workforce, about people trapped by circumstance, about unfulfilled potential and the education gap that keeps talented people in low-wage jobs. The executives watched in silence. When the episode ended, they applauded. The CEO stood and shook Kaplan's hand. He praised him for his empathetic storytelling, for giving voice to the voiceless, for showing the human side of their organization. Kaplan smiled. He thanked them. He felt like he had finally proven himself. The video leaked online 3 days later. Someone at the retreat uploaded it to a private LinkedIn group for hospitality professionals. From there, it spread. Food service workers shared it with captions like "This is all of us, and the system is broken." Within a week, it had 20,000 views. Kaplan's inbox filled with praise. Industry publications reached out for interviews. The company's PR department sent him a congratulatory email. His boss called him personally to say the board was impressed. He had never felt more validated. In New York, a journalist named Jessica Raines watched the video at her desk. She worked for Eater. She covered food industry labor issues. She had seen 100 videos like this, corporate content that exploited workers while pretending to honor them. But something about this one bothered her. The man in the video, his knife work was too clean, too professional. She watched the footage 3 more times. She paused on his hands, the way he moved, the muscle memory that went deeper than prep cook training. She started writing. Her article published 2 days later. The headline read, "The Tragedy of Untrained Talent. Why Culinary Education Gatekeeping Keeps Genius in Prep Kitchens." She embedded screenshots from Kaplan's video, Thomas's hands, his face partially visible under the fluorescent lights, his quiet answer when asked about culinary school. The article went viral faster than the video had. In a restaurant kitchen in Manhattan, a chef named Marcus Huang read the article during his break. He scrolled through the screenshots. He stopped on one image, the angle of the man's shoulders, the way he held his knife. Something about it pulled at his memory. He zoomed in on the photo. The face was older, tired, but the hands were unmistakable. Marcus opened his messages and sent a DM to Jessica Raines. "I know this guy." Raines responded within minutes. "Who is he?" Marcus typed quickly. His fingers shook slightly. "His name is Thomas Brennan. I worked with him at Veggies in 2013. He staged there for a few months. He's not untrained. He's self-taught. And he was better than half the CIA graduates I've worked with. He was supposed to be the next big thing in Philly. What the hell happened to him?" Raines read the message twice. She opened a new tab and started searching. Thomas Brennan, Philadelphia, Veggies. Nothing came up. No social media, no recent mentions. The man had vanished. She called the Hamiltons' corporate office. She identified herself as a journalist with Eater. She said she wanted to do a follow-up interview with Thomas Brennan from the documentary series. The receptionist transferred her to the communications department. A woman answered. She sounded excited. She said they would love to facilitate an interview. She took Raines's contact information and promised to follow up. The call went to Elliot Kaplan's desk 10 minutes later. He listened to the voicemail and smiled. Eater wanted to feature his documentary. This was exactly the kind of press he needed. He called the receptionist back and told her to schedule the interview. He would arrange everything personally. He did not ask Thomas for permission. He sent an email to HR marking Thomas as required for a mandatory staff meeting on Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. The subject line read, "Media interview attendance required." Thomas saw the email when he checked his phone after his shift. He read it 3 times. His chest tightened. His hands went cold. He did not want to do this. He did not want to be interviewed. He did not want more cameras, more questions, more people looking at him like he was something broken that needed fixing. But the email said mandatory. It said attendance required. It did not ask. It told. Thomas sat on his couch in the dark apartment. Nina was asleep in her room. The city hummed outside the window. He thought about calling in sick. He thought about quitting. He thought about taking Nina and moving somewhere no one would find them. But he had rent due in 2 weeks. He had groceries to buy. He had a daughter who needed stability more than she needed a father who ran. He put his phone down. He lay back on the couch. He stared at the ceiling. Across the city, in Philadelphia's Old City neighborhood, Jessica Raines sat at her laptop searching through old food industry forums. She typed Thomas Brennan, Philadelphia into the search bar. She scrolled through pages of results. Most were unrelated. Wrong people, wrong cities. Then she found something. A forum post from 2013. A thread about promising young chefs in Philadelphia. Someone had written, "Whatever happened to that kid from South Philly who turned down CIA to take care of his sister? He was working at some hotel kitchen last I heard." Shame. He had real talent. Raines screenshot the post. She opened a new document and started typing notes. Thomas Brennan turned down culinary school, had a sister, worked in hotel kitchens. She sent another message to Marcus Huang. Did he have a sister? Marcus responded immediately. I don't know. He never talked about his personal life. But now that you mention it, he was always exhausted. Like he wasn't sleeping. And he never came to any after-work things. Just showed up, cooked, and left. Raines added more notes. She was building a story. She could feel it. Something bigger than Kaplan's documentary. Something true. She just needed to find out what Thomas Brennan was hiding, and she had less than a week to do it. Thomas sat at his kitchen table at 2 a.m. Nina was asleep in her room. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. He needed to leave for work in 30 minutes, but his body would not move. The conversation with Nina 3 days ago still echoed in his head. Every single day. That's what he had told her when she asked if he wished he'd gone to cooking school. The honesty had cracked something open inside him, something he had sealed shut 7 years ago. He looked at his hands. Scarred. Calloused. The hands of a man who had spent 2 decades working with knives. A memory surfaced without warning. He was 18 years old, standing in his mother's kitchen in South Philadelphia. The acceptance letter from the Culinary Institute of America sat on the counter. Full scholarship, room and board, a future that looked like light. His mother was in the hospital. Stage 4 ovarian cancer, 2 weeks left, maybe 3. His sister Lauren sat in her wheelchair by the window. She was 12, born with cerebral palsy. She could not walk, could not feed herself, could not be left alone. Thomas had read the letter 5 times. He had called the school and asked if he could defer for a year. They said no. Scholarships were awarded annually. If he did not accept now, the offer would go to someone else. His mother died 2 weeks after his high school graduation. Thomas buried her on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, he became Lauren's legal guardian. On Thursday, he got his food handler's certification and applied for prep cook jobs at every hotel kitchen in Philadelphia. He was 18 years old and he had chosen. Thomas blinked. The memory dissolved. He was back in his apartment, 39 years old, sitting alone in the dark. Another memory. He was 21, working the overnight shift at a hotel kitchen downtown. Lauren was 15. He would finish his shift at 11, take the bus home, make her lunch, help her with physical therapy exercises, give her medications, put her to bed, and then go to the library. The library had cookbooks, hundreds of them. French technique, Italian cuisine, Japanese knife skills. Thomas would sit at a corner table and read for hours. He would memorize recipes, study plating photographs, trace diagrams of proper cutting angles with his finger. Then he would go home and practice. He would buy cheap vegetables with his grocery budget and spend Lauren's therapy sessions working through the techniques he had learned. Brunoise, julienne, chiffonade, tournée. His hands learned the movements through repetition, through obsession. By the time he was 25, chefs noticed him. They asked where he trained. He said nowhere. They did not believe him. Thomas stood up from the table. He poured himself water. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window. Another memory. He was 28. A hospital room. Lauren had pneumonia again. A nurse was checking her vitals. The nurse's name was Sarah. She was kind. She asked Thomas questions about his life. He answered honestly for the first time in years. Sarah became his friend. Then more than his friend. They married quietly at City Hall. She moved into his apartment. She helped him care for Lauren. For 3 years, Thomas experienced something he thought he would never have. Partnership. Shared burden. Hope. Sarah encouraged him to pursue cooking seriously. She said he was too talented to stay in hotel kitchens forever. She covered Lauren's care on his days off so he could stage at better restaurants. Thomas worked at Vitry, at Fork. At Zahav, chefs wanted to hire him. They said he had something special. When Vitry offered him a junior sous position, Sarah told him to take it. He did. He believed he could balance both lives. He believed he had finally earned something for himself. He was wrong. Thomas gripped the edge of the sink. His breath came faster. The worst memory. December 2014. Lauren was 23. She had contracted pneumonia. Sarah called him at work. She said Lauren's fever was spiking. She said they needed to take her to the hospital. Thomas was at Vitry, working a private tasting menu for a James Beard Foundation dinner. The most important night of his career. He told Sarah he would meet them at the hospital in 2 hours. He did not see her calls after that. His phone was in his locker. The kitchen was loud. The service was perfect. The guests praised every course. By the time Thomas got to the hospital, Lauren was gone. Sarah was sitting in the waiting room. Her face was empty. She looked at him and asked one question. What was it all for? Thomas could not answer. He still could not answer. Nina was born 6 weeks later. Thomas quit Vitry the day after the funeral. He walked away from every offer, every connection, every opportunity. He took the first anonymous prep cook job he could find. Overnight hours. Low pressure. No ambition required. Sarah left when Nina was 2. She could not forgive him. He did not blame her. For 7 years, Thomas had told himself he was protecting Nina. He was building a stable life. He was being present. He was not making the same mistakes. But sitting in his kitchen at 2:30 in the morning, Thomas finally understood the truth. He was not hiding to protect Nina. He was hiding to protect himself. He was hiding because wanting things had killed the person he loved most. He was hiding because ambition had cost him everything. He was hiding because, if he never wanted anything again, he could never fail anyone again. It was not sacrifice. It was cowardice. Thomas looked at the clock. 2:45. He needed to leave for work. He put on his jacket. He walked to the door. He stopped. His reflection stared back at him from the hallway mirror. He looked older than 39. Tired, bent. A man who had spent 7 years trying to disappear. He opened the door and walked into the night. The streets were empty. The city was dark. He moved through the cold air toward the Hamilton. But something had shifted. He could not unsee what he had finally allowed himself to see. He could not unhear Nina's question. But don't you wish you'd gone? Every single day. Thomas arrived at the basement kitchen at 2:58. He clocked in. He tied his apron. He pulled his knives from the locker. He started prepping vegetables. But for the first time in 7 years, his hands moved differently. Not invisible, not automatic. He was present in a way that frightened him. He was awake in a way that hurt. And he knew, even as he tried to fall back into routine, that he could never go back to sleep again. The email arrived on a Monday morning. Thomas saw it when he woke up at 2 in the afternoon. The subject line read, "Exciting Opportunity, Live Cooking Demonstration Event." He opened it. His chest tightened as he read. Elliot Kaplan was hosting a live cooking demonstration at the Hamilton, a promotional event for the documentary series. Local media would attend, food bloggers, and a celebrity chef from the Food Network named Jordan Wells, who would mentor Thomas by teaching him professional techniques on camera. The email called it inspirational, from prep cook to prime time. A chance to showcase hidden talent. Thomas read it twice. Then he called the number at the bottom of the email. A woman from corporate communications answered. Her voice was bright and rehearsed. "I can't do this," Thomas said. "I'm sorry. The cooking demonstration. I can't participate." There was a pause. The woman's tone shifted. "Brennan, this is a mandatory company event. Mr. Kaplan specifically requested your participation." "I didn't agree to this." "Your employment contract includes a clause about participating in company promotional activities. If you refuse, it will be noted as insubordination. The company will have no choice but to—" Thomas hung up. He sat on the couch. His phone buzzed. Another email. This one from Kaplan directly. The message was short, professional but firm. "Thomas, I understand change can be uncomfortable. But this is an incredible opportunity for you and for our organization. I need you to trust me. If you choose not to participate, HR will interpret that as a lack of team alignment. I'd hate to see that impact your future here." Thomas read between the lines. Participate or lose your job. He had $600 in his bank account. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Nina needed new shoes. The heater in the apartment was making a sound that meant it would break soon. He could not afford to lose this job. He typed a response. 3 words. "I'll be there." Across the city, Jessica Raines sat in a coffee shop in Old City with her laptop open. She had been searching for 3 days. Thomas Brennan, Philadelphia. Culinary school, sister. Most searches led nowhere. But then she found it. A forum post from 2013. A thread on a Philadelphia restaurant industry message board. Someone had written, "Whatever happened to that kid from South Philly who turned down CIA to take care of his sister? He was working at some hotel kitchen, last I heard. Shame. He had real talent." Raines screenshot the post. She opened her messages and wrote to Marcus Wong. "You said Thomas Brennan disappeared after his sister died. Did you know he had a sister?" Marcus responded within minutes. "No, he never mentioned her. But that would explain a lot. He was always exhausted, always rushing home after shifts, never socialized. I thought he was just antisocial." Raines opened a new search tab. She typed Thomas Brennan, Philadelphia, sister guardian, not nothing. She tried Thomas Brennan, South Philadelphia family. Still nothing. She tried a different approach. Public records. Court documents. Guardianship filings from 2003 to 2005. It took 2 hours, but she found it. Thomas Michael Brennan. Legal guardian. Lauren Rose Brennan. Cerebral palsy. Filed August 2003. Raines felt her pulse quicken. She kept searching. Lauren Brennan, death certificate. December 2014. Cause of death, pneumonia complications. The timeline matched. Thomas had disappeared from the restaurant scene in late 2014, right after his sister died. Raines needed confirmation. She needed someone who knew the full story. She searched for Sarah Brennan, Philadelphia nurse. Married Thomas Brennan, 2011. Divorced, 2017. She found a phone number through a nursing registry. She called it. A woman answered on the third ring. "Is this Sarah Brennan? Who's asking?" Rains identified herself. She explained she was writing an article about Thomas, about his past, about the documentary. Sarah was quiet for a long time. "Why are you digging into this?" "Because I think there's a story here that needs to be told correctly." Another pause. "What do you want to know?" Rains asked about Lauren, about the scholarship, about why Thomas left Vetri. Sarah answered every question. Her voice was flat, distant, but honest. When the call ended, Rains opened a new document and started writing. The article took shape over 2 days. She titled it, "The Man Who Chose Family Over Fame and Taught Himself to Cook in the Margins." Before publishing, she sent a courtesy email to Thomas. She asked for comment. She waited. Thomas never responded. But someone else saw the email. Nina had been checking her father's laptop every afternoon while he slept. She liked to send him drawings through his email. Little pictures she made at school, hearts and stars and stick figures of the two of them. She opened his inbox on Thursday afternoon. She saw the email from Jessica Rains. The subject line said, "Request for comment article about your story." Nina clicked it. She read the attachment. The article was long. It had sections and quotes and dates. Nina read slowly. Some words she didn't know, but she understood enough. Her father had a sister named Lauren. Lauren was sick. Their mother died. Thomas had to take care of Lauren instead of going to school. He taught himself to cook. He met Nina's mother. Lauren died. Nina was born. Thomas quit his job to take care of Nina. Everything he had done, every choice he had made, it was all because someone needed him. Nina closed the laptop. She sat very still. Her hands shook. She thought about what her father had said. "Sometimes you make a choice because someone you love needs you." She thought about the question she had asked. "But don't you wish you'd gone?" She thought about his answer. Every single day, Nina did not tell him she knew. She went to her room. She lay on her bed. She stared at the ceiling. The cooking demonstration was scheduled for Friday morning at 10. Friday arrived cold and gray. Thomas woke up at 7. He showered. He put on clean clothes. He made Nina breakfast. She was quieter than usual. She picked at her cereal. "You okay?" he asked. Nina looked up at him. Her eyes were red. "My stomach hurts." Thomas felt her forehead. "No fever. Do you want to stay home?" She nodded. Thomas hesitated. The event started at 10. He would need to leave by 9. If Nina stayed home, she would be alone until noon. "I have to go to work this morning. For a few hours. Are you okay by yourself?" Nina nodded again. "I'll check on you at lunch. Call me if you need anything." "Okay. Okay." Thomas kissed her forehead. He grabbed his jacket. He walked to the door. He looked back at her one more time. "I love you." "I love you too." Thomas left. The door closed behind him. The apartment went quiet. Nina sat at the table for 60 seconds. Then she stood up. She went to her room. She got dressed. She put on her purple jacket. She found her father's laptop in the living room and put it in her backpack. She walked to the door. She unlocked it. She stepped into the hallway. She was 9 years old and she was going to fix this. The Hamilton's grand ballroom smelled like furniture polish and coffee. Stage lights stood in each corner, pointed at a prep station in the center of the room. Cameras on tripods, microphones on booms. 50 people sat in folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Thomas stood beside the prep station. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders curved forward. He did not look at the audience. Elliot Kaplan stood at the front of the room wearing a dark suit. He smiled at the cameras. He gestured broadly like a game show host. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "Today is about possibility. about what happens when we invest in people, when we see potential and nurture it. He turned to the man beside Thomas, Jordan Wells, mid-40s, confident posture. Chef's whites with his name embroidered on the chest. Thomas had seen him on television, cooking competitions, guest judge segments. Jordan Wells needs no introduction, Kaplan said. Award-winning chef, television personality. And today he's here to mentor one of our own, to show us that talent can be found anywhere, even in a basement kitchen at 3 in the morning. The audience applauded politely. Food bloggers typed on laptops. A local news camera panned across the room. Wells stepped forward. He shook Thomas's hand. His grip was firm. "Good to meet you," Wells said. Thomas nodded. He did not speak. Wells turned to the audience. His energy was warm, genuine. He did not know he was part of Kaplan's performance. "Knife work is the foundation of everything we do in a kitchen," Wells said. "It's not just about cutting food. It's about precision, consistency, respect for your ingredients." He picked up a knife from the prep station. He demonstrated a basic julienne cut on a carrot. His movements were clean, professional. He narrated each step. "Now I want to see what Thomas normally does," Wells said. He handed the knife to Thomas. "Show me your technique." Thomas took the knife. His hand closed around the handle, muscle memory older than his daughter. He selected a carrot from the pile. He positioned it on the cutting board. He began to cut. His hands moved without thought. The blade flashed under the lights. Thin coins fell in perfect uniform slices. Then he switched to brunoise. Tiny cubes, each one identical. Then julienne. Matchstick precision. Wells watched. His narration trailed off. After 30 seconds, he went quiet. Thomas moved to the next technique. Tournée cuts. Paysanne. Chiffonade. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing steadied. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Wells leaned closer. He studied Thomas's hands. The angle of the blade. The economy of motion. "Where did you learn that?" Wells asked. Thomas stopped cutting. He set down the knife. He did not answer. Wells picked up one of the tournée cuts, a carrot shaped into a 7-sided oblong, the kind of cut that takes culinary students months to master. Thomas had done it in 12 seconds. "You didn't learn that in a prep kitchen," Wells said quietly. "That's hours of practice. That's obsession." He turned to Kaplan. His expression had shifted. "Did you know he could do this?" Kaplan smiled. He spread his hands. "He's talented. That's why we're—" "This isn't talent," Wells interrupted. "This is training." "Who taught you?" Thomas looked at his hands. They were shaking slightly. He opened his mouth. No words came. The ballroom door opened at the back of the room. A small figure in a purple jacket stepped through. Dark curly hair in a ponytail, backpack on her shoulders. Nina. Thomas's chest tightened. His vision narrowed. Nina walked down the center aisle. 50 people turned to look at her. She did not stop. She walked straight to the stage. Her face was pale but determined. "Nobody taught him," Nina said. Her voice was small but clear. "He taught himself." Thomas stepped toward her. "Nina, what are you?" She reached into her backpack. She pulled out his laptop. The screen was open. She walked past Thomas and handed it to Jordan Wells. "My dad got into the best cooking school in the country," Nina said. She was looking at Wells, but her words filled the room. "He didn't go because he had to take care of his sister. And then he had to take care of me." Wells took the laptop. He looked at the screen. His eyes moved across the text. "That's why he skipped college," Nina continued. "Not because he wasn't good enough. Because we needed him." Thomas stood frozen. His daughter, 9 years old, standing on a stage in front of strangers, saying the words he had spent 7 years hiding. The audience was silent. Phones came out. Cameras pointed at the stage. Wells read for 30 seconds. His expression changed. Confusion became recognition. Recognition became something like awe. He looked up at Thomas. His face was different now. "You're Thomas Brennan," Wells said. It was not a question. Thomas could not speak. He could not move. "The Thomas Brennan," Wells continued. "The stage from Vetri. People still talk about you." He turned to the audience. He held up the laptop so they could see the screen. This man was offered a full scholarship to the Culinary Institute of America. He turned it down to become a caregiver for his sister who had cerebral palsy. Wells's voice carried across the ballroom. He taught himself to cook, alone, while working overnight shifts, while raising a child with special needs, and then his own daughter. And he got this good. He gestured to the perfect cuts on the cutting board. "Do you understand what that means? Most of us had teachers, mentors, culinary school programs with world-class instructors." Wells paused. He had a library card and a prep station at 3 in the morning. Thomas looked at Nina. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "You weren't supposed to know," he whispered. Nina took a step closer. "Why not?" she asked. "She's part of our family." Thomas's throat closed. Tears burned behind his eyes. For the first time in 7 years, he could not hold them back. They came without sound, without warning, just falling. He knelt down. He pulled Nina into his arms. He held her the way he used to hold Lauren, the way he had been too afraid to hold anyone since. "I thought if you knew what I gave up," he said into her hair, "you'd feel like you were a burden." Nina pulled back. She looked at him. Her small hands touched his face. "You didn't give it up, Dad." Her voice was steady, certain. "You just did it differently. You're still a chef." She paused. "You're just my chef." Thomas broke. He cried in front of 50 strangers. He cried for Lauren, for Sarah, for 20 years of choices that felt like failures, for a daughter who saw him more clearly than he saw himself. Someone in the audience wiped their eyes. The cameras kept recording. Elliot Kaplan stood at the edge of the stage. His smile was gone. He looked like a man watching his narrative collapse in real time. And Jordan Wells stood holding a laptop that contained the truth Kaplan had never bothered to ask for. Jordan Wells turned to face the audience. He held the laptop high so everyone could see the screen. His voice carried across the ballroom with the weight of someone who finally understood what he was looking at. This man was offered a full scholarship to the Culinary Institute of America when he was 18 years old, Wells said. He turned it down to become the legal guardian of his sister. She had cerebral palsy. She needed round-the-clock care. There was no one else. The room was completely still. Phones were out. Cameras recorded. Every person leaned forward. He worked prep shifts at hotels while raising her, Wells continued. He taught himself to cook by reading library books during her therapy sessions. He practiced technique alone at 3 in the morning. He worked his way up from prep cook to line cook to sous chef with no degree, no formal training, no culinary school network. Wells gestured to the cutting board. The perfect tournée cuts, the brunoise, the julienne. When he was 28, his sister died. His daughter was born 6 weeks later. He quit the fine dining restaurant where he'd finally gotten his shot and took this job, overnight prep cook. Low pressure, stable hours, so he could be there for his daughter the way he'd been there for his sister. Wells paused. His eyes moved across the crowd. "Do you understand what that means? Most of us had teachers, mentors, culinary school programs with world-class instructors teaching us technique step by step. He had a library card and a prep station at 3 in the morning. Someone in the audience wiped their eyes. A food blogger had stopped typing. The local news camera stayed focused on Thomas. Elliot Kaplan stepped forward. His smile was forced. His voice was too loud. "That's exactly what I wanted to highlight," he said. Hidden talent, untapped potential. This is why we know. A woman stood up from the third row, mid-30s, laptop bag over her shoulder. She looked directly at Kaplan. "I'm Jessica Raines. I'm the journalist who wrote that article. And no, Mr. Rainist. Kaplan, this is not what you wanted to highlight." She pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen. A projector at the back of the room flickered to life. The wall behind the stage lit up with footage. Thomas's face. The basement kitchen. Kaplan's voiceover. This is the reality for so many Americans. Talented, hard-working, but trapped by circumstances. He skipped college, and now, at 40, he's chopping vegetables at 3 in the morning. This is the ceiling when you don't have that piece of paper. The room watched. Kaplan's hand on Thomas's shoulder. His performative sympathy. His assumption that he knew Thomas's story without asking. Do you ever think about what you could have been? The footage ended. The projection went dark. Raines turned to face the audience. "You called him a cautionary tale about skipping college," she said. "You didn't ask why he skipped. You didn't ask what his family needed. You just assumed he wasn't good enough, and then you used him to make yourself look empathetic." Kaplan's face flushed. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. A woman near the front stood up. She wore a hotel uniform, housekeeping. Her name tag said Maria. "He did this to all of us," Maria said. Her voice shook, but she kept talking. "He came in with his cameras and told our stories without asking what they actually were. He didn't want to know us. He wanted content." Another hotel employee nodded. A man from the kitchen stood. "We're not props," the man said. The room's energy shifted. What had been curiosity became anger. What had been spectacle became recognition. People looked at Kaplan differently now. The cameras turned toward him. Thomas barely registered any of it. He was still kneeling on the stage. Nina stood in front of him. His hands rested on her small shoulders. Tears ran down his face, and he did not try to stop them. "You weren't supposed to know about Lauren," he whispered. Nina looked at him with her mother's eyes. "Why not?" she asked. "She's part of our family." Thomas's breath hitched. His grip tightened on her shoulders. "I thought if you knew what I gave up, you'd feel like you were a burden." Nina shook her head. Her small hands came up and touched his face. Her fingers were warm. "You didn't give it up, Dad," she said. Her voice was steady, clear. "You just did it differently." She paused. The entire ballroom waited. "You're still a chef. You're just my chef." Thomas pulled her into his arms. He held her the way he used to hold Lauren when she was scared, the way he had been too terrified to hold anyone for 7 years. He cried into her hair, and she let him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and did not let go. Someone in the audience made a sound. A soft gasp or sob. Others followed. The moment was too raw, too real, too honest for performance. Jordan Wells stepped forward. He waited until Thomas looked up. Then he spoke quietly. Gently. "Thomas, I run a culinary apprenticeship program in North Philadelphia. It's for people who can't afford traditional culinary school, people who have complicated lives, people who need flexible hours." Thomas stared at him. His mind could not process what he was hearing. "I want you to teach there," Wells said. "Not as a student, as a master instructor. 2 mornings a week. Your choice of schedule, your choice of curriculum." Thomas opened his mouth, closed it. His hands tightened on Nina's back. "You don't need a degree to prove you belong in this industry," Wells continued. "You never did. You just needed someone to ask instead of assume." The room was silent, waiting. 50 people held their breath. Thomas looked at Nina. She nodded. He looked back at Wells. "Yes," Thomas said. His voice broke on the word. "Yes." The room erupted. Applause started in the back and rolled forward. People stood. The hotel employees clapped the loudest. Maria was crying. The kitchen worker who had stood up was nodding. Two men in suits appeared at Kaplan's side. Hotel security. One of them said something quietly. Kaplan's face went white. He tried to protest, but the security guards were already guiding him toward the side exit. His expensive suit, his rehearsed smile, his performance. All of it collapsed as he was escorted out of his own event. The cameras followed him until he disappeared through the door. Then they turned back to the stage, to Thomas, to Nina, to Jordan Wells, standing beside them like a witness to something holy. Nina pulled back from her father. She looked up at him. Her face was streaked with tears, but she was smiling. Thomas smiled back. For the first time in 7 years, the weight on his chest lifted. Not all the way, not completely, but enough that he could breathe, enough that he could start. Elliot Kaplan was placed on administrative leave that afternoon. The Hamiltons' parent company issued a statement before the sun set. They were reviewing workplace practices. They were committed to treating all employees with dignity and respect. Jessica Raines's full article published the next morning. It went viral within hours. The headline read, "The chef who chose family over fame and taught himself mastery in the margins." The article did not frame Thomas as a tragedy. It framed him as proof that education comes in many forms, that sacrifice is not the same as failure, that some of the most profound teaching happens not in classrooms but in quiet moments at 3 in the morning when no one is watching. By the end of the week, the story had been shared 2 million times. News outlets picked it up. Food industry publications wrote responses. People who had never heard of the Hamilton Hotel knew Thomas Brennan's name. Elliot Kaplan was quietly terminated 2 weeks later. The company did not make an announcement. He simply disappeared from their website and their organizational chart. The Hamiltons' new management created a scholarship in Thomas's name, the Thomas Brennan Scholarship, for hospitality workers pursuing culinary education, funded by redirecting the entire documentary budget. Thomas accepted Jordan Wells's offer to teach at the apprenticeship program in North Philadelphia, 2 mornings a week, Tuesday and Thursday, 9 to noon. But he kept his prep cook position at the Hamilton 3 nights a week. He liked the rhythm, the grounding, the quiet of working alone when the city slept. 9 months passed. The North Philadelphia Culinary Apprenticeship Program operated out of a converted warehouse near Broad Street. The kitchen smelled like fresh bread and simmering stock. Natural light poured through tall windows. 20 students worked at stations arranged in a wide semicircle. Thomas stood at the front on a Tuesday morning in early autumn. He wore the same worn chef's whites he had worn at Vetri 11 years ago. His hands moved through a demonstration of basic knife technique, grip, posture, the angle of the blade. The students watched him the way he had once watched library cookbook diagrams. Like this knowledge was a lifeline. A young woman named Keisha raised her hand. She was 19, single mother, worked overnight at a diner to support her son. "How do you know when you're doing it right?" she asked. Thomas set down his knife. He looked at her directly. "You feel it in your hands," he said. "The resistance, the rhythm. If you're fighting the knife, you're doing it wrong. If it feels like the knife is doing the work, you're getting close." He picked up a carrot. He demonstrated. His hands moved with the same precision they had always held, but his shoulders were looser now, his face more open. "Practice until your hands remember," he said. "Then practice some more." The class resumed. Thomas moved between stations. He corrected grip, adjusted posture, showed students how to feel the difference between a dull blade and a sharp one. At noon, the students cleaned their stations and filed out. Keisha lingered near the door. "Thank you," she said. Thomas nodded. He did not ask what she was thanking him for. He understood. At Nina's school, things had changed too. She had made 2 friends. Emma and Aisha. They sat together at lunch. They played together at recess. They thought it was cool that Nina's dad taught cooking. Nina still wore her purple jacket most days. She still got anxious sometimes. But the weight had lifted. She smiled more. She spoke up in class. She no longer sat alone by the fence. On Sunday morning, Thomas woke up at 8 instead of 2. The apartment was quiet. Warm light filtered through the kitchen window. Nina was already awake. She sat at the table drawing pictures of pasta shapes. "Ready?" Thomas asked. Nina nodded. She jumped up and washed her hands at the sink. Thomas pulled flour from the cabinet, eggs from the refrigerator, salt, olive oil. The same ingredients his mother had used when she taught him this recipe 30 years ago. The same recipe Lauren had loved. He poured flour onto the counter in a mound. He made a well in the center. Nina cracked eggs into the well with careful precision. Thomas added salt, a drizzle of oil. "Now we bring it together," he said. His hands worked the dough, pushing, folding, kneading. Nina watched for a moment. Then she stepped forward and joined him. Her small hands moved beside his larger ones. Flour dusted her fingers, her hair, her cheeks. She laughed. The sound was light, free. Thomas glanced at the refrigerator. 2 photos held by magnets. The first showed Lauren in her wheelchair, smiling, holding a wooden spoon. The second was new. Thomas and Nina at the apprenticeship program, surrounded by students in matching aprons, all of them looking at the camera, all of them looking like they belonged. "Is it supposed to feel like this?" Nina asked. She was rolling the dough now, her movements uncertain but determined. "Yeah," Thomas said, "exactly like that." They worked in comfortable silence. The dough came together, smooth and elastic. Thomas divided it into portions. He showed Nina how to roll it thin, how to cut it into ribbons, how to hang the strands to dry. Pasta draped over the backs of chairs, over the edge of the counter, long ribbons catching the morning light. Nina stepped back to admire their work. Her face was flushed. Her hands were covered in flour. She looked at her father. "We made a lot," she said. "We did. Can we invite people over for dinner?" Thomas paused. For 7 years, he had avoided inviting anyone into his life, into Nina's life, into the small, safe space they had built together. But something had changed. The walls had come down. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. "Yeah," he said, "we can do that." Nina smiled. She looked back at the pasta, then at her father. Her eyes were bright. "I'm glad you're my chef," she said. Thomas's throat tightened. He reached out and pulled her into a hug. She wrapped her arms around his waist and held on. They stood together in the kitchen, flour on their hands, pasta drying around them, sunlight warming the room, the smell of fresh dough and possibility filling the air. For the first time in 7 years, Thomas allowed himself to believe they would be okay. Not because the past had changed, not because the pain had disappeared, but because they were building something together, something new, something that belonged to them. Nina pulled back. She looked up at him. "Can we make dessert too?" Thomas smiled. "Yeah, we can make dessert too." They returned to the counter, side by side, father and daughter, teacher and student. 2 people who had learned that the most valuable education is not the one you receive in a classroom or from a prestigious institution. It is the one you give through sacrifice, through presence, through the quiet choice to show up every single day for the people who need you most. And in giving that education, in choosing love over ambition and presence over achievement, you discover that you have been learning all along. That the greatest mastery is not in perfecting a technique or earning a degree. It is in showing another human being that they matter, that they are worth choosing, that they are enough. Thomas and Nina worked together, creating something beautiful, building something that would sustain them. And in that ordinary Sunday morning kitchen, with flour on their hands and hope in their hearts, they were exactly where they needed to be.